Admiral Kethver stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the stars through the massive viewing screen. His forearms were crossed behind his back in the traditional pose of imperial authority. The bridge crew moved quietly around him, checking their instruments and waiting for orders. Today was supposed to be a simple patrol mission through the Outer Rim systems. Nothing important was supposed to happen. The Galactic Empire had ruled over 3,000 star systems for nearly 10,000 years. They had conquered countless worlds and brought hundreds of different alien species under their control. Some species joined willingly, seeking the protection and technology that came with Imperial membership. Others had to be convinced through shows of force. Most fell somewhere in between, accepting Imperial rule when they realized resistance was pointless. The Sol system was one of the boring ones. It contained a small yellow star with several planets, including one that supported a primitive species called humans. The humans had barely figured out how to leave their home planet. They had sent a few small ships to their nearest moon and built some basic space stations, but nothing impressive. The Empire classified them as a Level 2 civilization, which meant they were aware of space travel but posed no threat to anyone. Imperial policy for Level 2 civilizations was simple: leave them alone unless they became a problem. The humans were not a problem. They did not have faster-than-light travel. They did not have energy weapons. They did not even have artificial gravity on their ships. The Empire had bigger concerns than watching primitive species play with rockets. That was why Admiral Kethver was surprised when his sensor officer suddenly straightened up at her station. Lieutenant Zareth was a young Vilathi officer with excellent reflexes and sharp instincts. She had been monitoring the long-range sensors during their approach to the Sol system, looking for anything unusual. Apparently, she had found something. "Admiral," Lieutenant Zareth said, her voice carefully controlled. "I am detecting an energy signature that does not match our records for this system." Admiral Kethver turned toward her station. His yellow eyes narrowed slightly. "Explain." "The signature is coming from behind the third planet's natural satellite," she continued. "The energy output is significant, sir. Much higher than anything a Level 2 civilization should be capable of producing." The Admiral walked over to her station and looked at the sensor display. The readout showed the Sol system in standard tactical format. The third planet, called Earth by its inhabitants, appeared as a blue-green dot near the center of the screen. Its single moon was a smaller gray dot nearby, but behind the moon there was something else, something that was generating enormous amounts of energy. "How long has this signature been present?" Admiral Kethver asked. "Unknown, sir. This is our first detailed scan of the system in over 200 years. The signature could have been there all along, hidden behind the moon's gravitational shadow." Admiral Kethver studied the display more carefully. The energy output was indeed impressive. It was not as powerful as an Imperial dreadnought, but it was far beyond what humans should be able to produce, according to the Empire's intelligence files. Humans still used chemical rockets and nuclear reactors. This energy signature suggested something much more advanced. "Could it be natural?" the Admiral asked. "Some kind of stellar phenomenon?" Lieutenant Zareth shook her head. "Negative, sir. The pattern is too regular. This is definitely artificial, and sir, there is something else. The signature appears to be moving slightly, as if the source is a mobile object rather than a fixed installation." The Admiral considered this information. The Empire had seen many strange things in its long history. Sometimes primitive species found ancient artifacts left behind by more advanced civilizations. Sometimes they got lucky and made scientific breakthroughs ahead of schedule, but this felt different. The energy signature was too sophisticated, too well hidden. "Order the fleet to maintain current distance," Admiral Kethver commanded. "Send out probe drones for a closer look. I want to know what we are dealing with before we proceed." The bridge crew immediately began implementing his orders. 3. Small probe drones launched from the Eternal Dominion and began moving toward the mysterious energy source. The drones were equipped with advanced sensors and stealth technology. They could get close to almost anything without being detected. As the probes approached Earth's moon, the sensor readings became even more puzzling. The energy source was definitely artificial, but it was using technology that the Empire did not recognize. The power output suggested some kind of massive spacecraft, but the design signatures were completely unknown. "Admiral," Lieutenant Zareth called out, her voice now showing clear excitement. "The probes are detecting a solid object. It appears to be a spacecraft of enormous size, much larger than any human vessel on record." "How large?" the Admiral asked. "Preliminary estimates suggest a length of over 15 kilometers, sir." "That would make it larger than most Imperial cruisers." Admiral Kethver felt a chill run down his spine. 15 kilometers was indeed impressive. The Empire's largest ships were typically around 20 kilometers long, and those were rare dreadnoughts reserved for major military operations. The idea that primitive humans had somehow built something of comparable size was disturbing. "What about weapon signatures?" he asked. "That is the strange part, sir. The probes are not detecting any conventional weapons. No energy cannons, no missile tubes, no kinetic bombardment systems. But there are massive energy conduits running throughout the vessel, and some kind of field generators that we cannot identify." The Admiral studied the tactical display as more information came in from the probes. The mysterious ship was sleek and angular, with smooth curves that suggested advanced materials science. Its hull appeared to be made from some kind of dark metal that absorbed most sensor beams. Even the Empire's best scanning technology was having trouble penetrating its surface. "Sir," Lieutenant Zareth continued, "there is something else. The ship appears to be completely powered down except for minimal life support and stealth systems. It is as if it is hiding, waiting for something." Admiral Kethver made a decision. This discovery was too important to handle with a simple patrol fleet. Whatever the humans had built or found, it represented a significant change in the balance of power in this region of space. The Empire needed to know more, and they needed to respond appropriately. "Send an immediate message to Imperial Command," he ordered. "Priority 1 classification. Inform them that we have discovered evidence of advanced technology in the Sol system. Request immediate reinforcement by a full battle group." The communications officer began composing the message while Admiral Kethver continued to study the sensor data. The more he looked at the mysterious ship, the more questions he had. How had the humans acquired such advanced technology? Was this an isolated case, or were there other hidden surprises in the system? Most importantly, what were the humans planning to do with it? The Empire had encountered hidden weapons before. Sometimes primitive species found ancient battleships left over from long-dead civilizations. Sometimes they developed secret research projects that produced unexpected results. But those cases usually involved species that were already close to achieving faster than light travel. The humans were nowhere near that level of development, at least according to Imperial intelligence. "Admiral," the tactical officer called out, "I am detecting movement from the human space stations around the third planet. It appears they are aware of our presence." Admiral Kethver was not surprised. Imperial ships were large and hard to hide, especially when they were actively scanning a system. The humans had probably detected them as soon as they entered the outer edge of the Sol system. The question was whether the humans would see their arrival as a threat or an opportunity. "Any hostile actions?" the Admiral asked. "Negative, sir. The human ships are maintaining their normal patrol patterns. No weapons are being charged, and no additional ships are being launched." That was interesting. Either the humans were not worried about an Imperial fleet in their system, or they were very good at hiding their true reactions. Admiral Kethver suspected it might be both. If the humans had indeed built or acquired the massive ship hiding behind their moon, they might feel confident enough to remain calm in the face of Imperial attention. The probe drones continued their scan of the mysterious vessel. Each new piece of information made the situation more complex. The ship's power systems were unlike anything in Imperial records. Its hull materials seemed to bend light and sensor beams in unusual ways. Most disturbing of all, there were indications that the ship was not entirely complete. It appeared to be some kind of prototype or test vessel. If this was just a prototype, what were the humans really capable of building? Admiral Kethfer realized that the Empire's assessment of humanity would need to be completely revised. A species that could build ships on this scale using unknown technology was not a level 2 civilization. They were something much more dangerous. The Admiral's thoughts were interrupted by the communications officer. "Sir, we have received a response from Imperial Command. Admiral Thorax is en route with the 7th Battle Group, estimated arrival. Time is 6 days. Very good," Admiral Kethfer replied. "Continue monitoring the situation. I want to know if that ship moves so much as a meter." As the Imperial fleet settled into a watching position, Admiral Kethfer could not shake the feeling that they were missing something important. The humans had hidden this massive ship for who knew how long. What else might they be hiding? And why reveal it now, when an Imperial fleet had arrived in their system? The next few days would bring answers, but Admiral Kethfer suspected that those answers would only lead to more questions. The Sol system was turning out to be far more interesting than anyone had expected. 6 days later, Admiral Thorax arrived in the Sol system with the 7th Battle Group. His fleet was impressive even by Imperial standards. 12 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and over 100 support vessels filled the space around Admiral Kethfer's original patrol fleet. The combined force represented enough firepower to conquer most star systems. Admiral Thorax was an old veteran of the Empire's expansion wars. He had conquered 14 different worlds and brought 9 alien species under Imperial control. His reputation for swift, decisive action was known throughout the fleet. When younger officers wanted to impress their superiors, they tried to follow the Thorax doctrine of overwhelming force applied without hesitation. The two admirals met aboard the Eternal Dominion to discuss the situation. Admiral Thorax was a massive Krellian with thick armor plating and 4 powerful arms. His species had been among the first to join the Empire willingly, recognizing the benefits of Imperial technology and protection. In return, they had become some of the Empire's most effective military commanders. "Show me this mysterious human ship," Admiral Thorax said without any preliminary greetings. He was not known for wasting time on pleasantries. Admiral Kethfer led him to the bridge and activated the main display screen. The probe drones had been watching the hidden supercarrier for 6 days, gathering detailed information about its structure and capabilities. The accumulated data painted a picture that was both impressive and deeply concerning. "As you can see," Admiral Kethfer explained, "the vessel is approximately 15 kilometers in length and 3 kilometers in width. Its mass appears to be roughly equivalent to an Imperial dreadnought, but its design is completely unknown." Admiral Thorax studied the display with professional interest. He had seen many different types of spacecraft in his long career, from primitive chemical rockets to advanced Imperial warships. This human vessel did not fit into any category he recognized. "What about its capabilities?" Admiral Thorax asked. "That is where things become interesting," Admiral Kethfer replied. "Our sensors can detect massive power conduits throughout the ship, but we cannot determine what they power. The energy output suggests some kind of advanced propulsion system, but there are no visible engines. There are also several sections that our sensors cannot penetrate at all." Admiral Thorax frowned. Imperial sensor technology was among the most advanced in the galaxy. If their scanners could not penetrate certain sections of the human ship, it meant the humans were using materials or technologies that the Empire did not understand. "Weapons?" Admiral Thorax asked. "None that we can identify using conventional analysis. However, given the unknown nature of their technology, we cannot rule out the possibility of weapon systems we do not recognize." Admiral Thorax considered this information. In his experience, primitive species usually made the same mistakes when they acquired advanced technology. They built weapons first, defenses second, and everything else last. The fact that the human ship did not show obvious weapon signatures was either very good news or very bad news. What is your assessment of the threat level? Admiral Thorax asked. Admiral Kethfer hesitated before answering. Unknown, sir. If this is truly human technology, then our intelligence assessment of their civilization is completely wrong. If they acquired this technology from another source, we need to know what that source is and whether it represents a threat to the Empire. Admiral Thorax nodded. The situation clearly required direct action. Waiting and watching would not provide the answers they needed. It was time to make contact with the humans and find out what they were really capable of. Prepare a diplomatic mission, Admiral Thorax commanded. I want to speak with whoever is in charge of their government. We need answers and we need them quickly. The next day, an Imperial diplomatic shuttle approached Earth's largest space station. The shuttle was escorted by 4 heavily armed fighters, partly for protection and partly as a show of Imperial strength. Admiral Thorax wanted the humans to understand that they were dealing with a superior military force. The space station was a simple rotating wheel design, clearly intended to provide artificial gravity through centrifugal force. It was a basic solution to a basic problem, exactly what the Empire expected from a Level 2 civilization. But now that they knew about the hidden supercarrier, Admiral Thorax wondered what else the humans might be hiding. The human response to their diplomatic request had been polite but formal. They agreed to meet with Imperial representatives, but they insisted that the meeting take place on their space station rather than aboard an Imperial ship. Admiral Thorax found this mildly irritating, but he agreed. Showing flexibility could help build trust, and trust might lead to honest answers. The Imperial delegation consisted of Admiral Thorax himself, 2 junior officers, and a diplomatic translator. They were met at the station's docking bay by a small group of humans led by a woman wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. She was tall and lean, with short gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in every detail of their appearance. Welcome to Alpha Station, the woman said in accented but clear Imperial standard. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Thank you for accepting our invitation to meet here. Admiral Thorax was immediately impressed by several things. First, the humans had learned Imperial Standard, which suggested they had been monitoring Imperial communications for some time. Second, their leader was a military officer rather than a civilian politician, which suggested they took the Imperial presence seriously. Third, she had called it an invitation rather than a demand, which showed diplomatic skill. I am Admiral Thorax of the Imperial 7th Battle Group, he replied formally. We are here to discuss recent discoveries in your system that require clarification. Admiral Chain smiled politely. Of course, please follow me. We have prepared a conference room where we can speak privately. The conference room was simple but functional, with a large table and comfortable chairs that had been adjusted to accommodate the Admiral's different body types. Admiral Chun gestured for the Imperial delegation to sit, then took her own seat across from them. I assume you want to ask about our research vessel, Admiral Chun said without waiting for Admiral Thorax to begin. Her directness caught him off. Guard? Research vessel? Admiral Thorax asked. The ship behind our moon, Admiral Chun explained calmly. I imagine your sensors detected it as soon as you entered the system. We have been monitoring your probe drones for the past week. Admiral Thorax exchanged glances with his officers. The humans had been watching them watch the hidden ship. This suggested either very good sensor technology or very good intelligence gathering capabilities, possibly both. Yes, Admiral Thorax said. We detected a large vessel of unknown design hiding behind your moon. We would like an explanation. Admiral Hyun leaned back in her chair, looking completely relaxed. That old thing. It is just one of our research vessels. We use it to test new technologies and conduct deep space experiments. Nothing particularly exciting, I am afraid. Admiral Thorax stared at her. Just one of their research vessels? The ship they had detected was larger than most Imperial cruisers. If the humans considered it nothing particularly exciting, what did their actual warships look like? This research vessel, Admiral Thorax said carefully, is quite large for a species that has only recently achieved basic spaceflight. Admiral Chun smiled again. Oh, we have been working on space technology for much longer than most people realize. Humans are very good at solving problems when we put our minds to it. Sometimes we surprise even ourselves with what we can accomplish. There was something in her tone that made Admiral Thorax uncomfortable. She was not acting like a representative of a primitive species facing a superior military force. She was acting like someone who held cards that she had not yet revealed. Perhaps you could give us a tour of this research vessel, Admiral Thorax suggested. The Empire is always interested in learning about new technologies. Admiral Chun considered this request for a moment. I am afraid that would not be possible. The research vessel is currently undergoing some very delicate experiments that could be disrupted by outside interference. However, I would be happy to show you some of our other facilities. Other facilities? Admiral Thorax asked. Certainly, Admiral Chun replied. If you are interested in human technology, I could provide you with coordinates to our main shipyard. It would give you a much better idea of what we are capable of producing. Admiral Thorax felt a chill run down his spine. Main shipyard? If the massive ship behind the moon was just a research vessel, what would they find at humanity's main production facility? That would be very educational, Admiral Thorax said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Admiral Chun reached into a pocket and pulled out a small datapad. She entered some information and then handed it to one of Admiral Thorax's officers. These coordinates will take you to our primary construction facility. It is located in the outer region of our system, where we have more space to work on larger projects. Admiral Thorax looked at the coordinates. They pointed to a location in what Imperial charts showed as empty space beyond the system's outermost planets. If the humans had built a shipyard there, it would explain why Imperial intelligence had never detected it. This is very generous of you, Admiral Thorax said. As a gesture of goodwill, perhaps we could arrange for some of our technical officers to visit your facility. Of course, Admiral Chun replied immediately. We believe that cooperation between our species could be very beneficial for everyone involved. However, I should mention that our shipyard is quite busy at the moment. We have several large projects under construction that are nearing completion. The way she said large projects made Admiral Thorax even more uncomfortable. Everything about this conversation suggested that the humans were far more advanced than they appeared. But if that was true, why had they hidden their capabilities for so long? Admiral Chun, Admiral Thorax said, I hope you will forgive my directness, but your species has been classified as Level 2 by Imperial intelligence. The technologies you describe suggest a much higher level of development. Admiral Chun's smile became slightly warmer. Classifications can be misleading, Admiral Thorax. Sometimes it is better to let people make their own assumptions rather than correcting them unnecessarily. That statement sent alarm bells ringing in Admiral Thorax's mind. The humans had deliberately allowed the Empire to underestimate their capabilities. But why? What were they planning? I think a visit to your shipyard would indeed be very educational, Admiral Thorax said. When would be convenient? Whenever you are ready, Admiral Chun replied. The coordinates I gave you will take you directly there. I think you will find it quite impressive. The meeting continued for another hour, but Admiral Chun skillfully deflected most of Admiral Thorax's questions while appearing to be completely cooperative. By the time the Imperial delegation returned to their shuttle, Admiral Thorax was more confused than when he had arrived. As the shuttle departed from the human space station, Admiral Thorax reviewed what he had learned. The humans were definitely more advanced than Imperial intelligence believed. They had been hiding their true capabilities for unknown reasons. They had a main shipyard in the outer system that was apparently producing large projects. And they seemed remarkably confident. For a species facing an Imperial battle group, Sir, his aide asked, do you think we should trust the coordinates they gave us? Admiral Thorax considered the question. In his experience, primitive species usually reacted to Imperial contact with either fear or aggression. The humans had shown neither reaction. Instead, they had been polite, cooperative, and strangely confident. It was almost as if they had been expecting this encounter. "Prepare the fleet for movement to those coordinates," Admiral Thorax commanded. "But maintain full battle readiness. I have a feeling we are about to discover that we know much less about humanity than we thought." Admiral Thorax stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the coordinates that Admiral Chun had provided grow closer on the navigation display. The entire 7th Battle Group was moving together through the outer regions of the Sol system, past the orbit of the furthest known planets. According to Imperial charts, this area of space contained nothing but empty void, asteroids, and cosmic dust. The Admiral was beginning to suspect that Imperial charts were very wrong about many things. In this system, "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "we are approaching the coordinates. I'm not detecting anything yet, but we are still several million kilometers away." Admiral Thorax nodded. "Maintain full sensor sweeps. I want to know about anything larger than a space rock before we get within weapons range." The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations, monitoring the various systems that kept the massive fleet functioning. Admiral Thorax had ordered all ships to battle stations before beginning their journey to the coordinates. He was not sure what they would find, but he wanted to be ready for anything. "Admiral," the communications officer said, "I am receiving a transmission from the human Admiral Chun." "Put it through," Admiral Thorax commanded. Admiral Chun's face appeared on the main screen. She was sitting in what appeared to be a command center, with other humans working at control stations behind her. Her expression was calm and professional, just as it had been during their meeting. "Admiral Thorax," she said with a polite smile, "I see that you have decided to visit our shipyard. I hope you will find it educational." "We are approaching the coordinates you provided," Admiral Thorax replied. "However, our sensors are not detecting any artificial structures." Admiral Chun's smile became slightly wider. "That is not surprising. Our shipyard uses advanced stealth technology to avoid detection by conventional sensors. You should be able to see it clearly once you arrive." Advanced stealth technology. Admiral Thorax added that to his growing list of human capabilities that did not match their supposed level of development. Stealth technology was difficult to develop and expensive to maintain. Only the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had mastered it completely. "How advanced is this stealth technology?" Admiral Thorax asked. "Oh, quite advanced," Admiral Chun replied casually. "We have been working on it for several centuries now. We find it very useful for keeping our activities private." Several centuries. Admiral Thorax felt another chill run down his spine. According to Imperial records, humans had only achieved basic spaceflight within the last 50 years. If they had been working on stealth technology for centuries, then Imperial intelligence was not just wrong about human capabilities. It was completely backwards. "Admiral Chun," Admiral Thorax said carefully, "how long has your species possessed faster than light travel?" Admiral Chun paused for a moment, as if considering how much to reveal. "Longer than you might think, Admiral. Humans have been traveling between the stars for quite some time now." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Thorax staring at a blank screen. The implications of what Admiral Chun had just said were staggering. If humans had possessed faster than light travel for centuries, they could have explored the galaxy extensively. They could have studied other civilizations, including the Empire itself. They could have been preparing for this moment for a very long time. "Sir," the sensor officer called out urgently, "I am detecting massive energy signatures ahead. Multiple sources, very powerful." Admiral Thorax turned toward the sensor station. "Show me." The main display switched to a tactical view of the space ahead of them. At first it looked empty, just as the Imperial charts suggested, but as Admiral Thorax watched, the display began to change. Energy signatures appeared, first as small dots, then as larger shapes. Within moments, the seemingly empty space was filled with dozens of massive structures. "What are we looking at?" Admiral Thorax asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew. "Shipyard, sir," the sensor officer replied, his voice filled with amazement. Multiple shipyards, each one larger than anything in Imperial space. And sir, there are ships under construction? Lots of ships? The display continued to resolve as their sensors gathered more information. What Admiral Thorax saw made his blood run cold. The humans had not built one shipyard in the outer system. They had built an entire industrial complex that dwarfed anything the Empire had ever constructed. Dozens of massive construction platforms floated in organized formations, each one surrounded by partially completed spacecraft. The ships under construction were enormous, some even larger than Imperial dreadnoughts. Stranger still, many of them seemed to be using design principles that Admiral Thorax did not recognize. Sir, the tactical officer said, I am detecting movement. Multiple ships are approaching our position. Hostile movement? Admiral Thorax asked. Unknown, sir. The ships are not displaying weapons, but their design is completely unfamiliar. They appear to be using some kind of propulsion system that does not match any known technology. Admiral Thorax watched as the human ships approached. They moved smoothly through space without any visible engines or exhaust trails. Their hulls were sleek and dark, seeming to bend light around them in strange ways. Most disturbing of all, they moved in perfect formation, as if controlled by a single mind. How many ships? Admiral Thorax asked. Difficult to determine, sir. Our sensors are having trouble getting accurate counts. The estimate is somewhere between 50 and 200 vessels. Admiral Thorax realized that his fleet was potentially outnumbered by an unknown factor. Worse, the human ships were using technology that the Empire did not understand. In his long military career, Admiral Thorax had learned that unknown technology was usually bad news for whoever was facing it. Sir, the communications officer said, I am receiving another transmission from Admiral Chun. Put it through. Admiral Chun's image appeared again, but now she was clearly on the bridge of a spacecraft rather than in a ground-based command center. The bridge around her was unlike anything Admiral Thorax had ever seen, with holographic displays and control systems that seemed to respond to her thoughts rather than her touch. Welcome to our primary construction facility, Admiral Thorax, she said, her tone still polite but now carrying an undertone of something that might have been amusement. I hope you are finding it as impressive as I promised. Admiral Thorax looked at the tactical display, which now showed the full scope of the human industrial complex. The construction platform stretched across millions of cubic kilometers of space. The ships under construction numbered in the hundreds. And somewhere, among all those structures, an unknown number of completed human warships were moving to surround his fleet. This is quite impressive, Admiral Thorax admitted. How long have you been building all of this? Oh, we started construction several hundred years ago, Admiral Chun replied casually. Humans are very good at long-term planning when we need to be. We prefer to be prepared for any situation that might arise. Admiral Thorax felt the pieces of a very large puzzle beginning to fall into place. The humans had not recently acquired advanced technology. They had possessed it for centuries. They had not been hiding from the galaxy by accident. They had been deliberately concealing their true capabilities while they prepared for something. Admiral Chun, Admiral Thorax said, I think it is time for complete honesty between our species. What exactly are you preparing for? Admiral Chun's expression became more serious. Admiral Thorax, the galaxy is a dangerous place. The Empire has conquered many worlds and enslaved many species. Some civilizations prefer to be ready to defend themselves rather than hope for the mercy of conquerors. The words hit Admiral Thorax like a physical blow. The humans were not just more advanced than the Empire had believed. They were actively preparing to resist Imperial expansion. Worse, they had been preparing for centuries, which meant they knew exactly what they were doing. You view the Empire as a threat, Admiral Thorax stated. The Empire has made itself a threat to any species that values independence, Admiral Chun replied. We have watched you conquer world after world for over 1,000 years. We decided long ago that we would not allow Earth to become another Imperial colony. Admiral Thorax looked around his bridge, seeing the worry on his officers' faces. They were beginning to understand what he had already realized. The Imperial fleet was not in a position to threaten humanity. Humanity was in a position to threaten them. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "the human ships have completely surrounded our formation. One count at least 150 vessels, possibly more. They are maintaining a respectful distance, but they could close to weapons range." Very quickly, Admiral Thorax turned back to the communications screen. Admiral Chin was watching him with an expression of calm patience, as if she was waiting for him to reach an obvious conclusion. "What do you want from us?" Admiral Thorax asked. "Nothing complicated," Admiral Chun replied. "We want the Empire to understand that humanity is not a primitive species that can be conquered or bullied. We want you to take that message back to your superiors. And we want to demonstrate that we are serious about defending ourselves and any other species that asks for our help." As if responding to some unspoken signal, the space around the Imperial fleet began to change. More human ships appeared, materializing out of what had seemed like empty space. These were not the sleek vessels that had first approached them. These were massive warships, bristling with weapons and energy systems that made Imperial dreadnoughts look like children's toys. "How many ships do you have?" Admiral Thorax asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "In this system? Several thousand," Admiral Chung replied. "Throughout the galaxy? Well, that would be telling, wouldn't it?" Admiral Thorax stared at the tactical display as more and more human ships continued to appear. Each one was larger and more advanced than anything in the Imperial fleet. Each one represented technology that the Empire did not understand and could not match. "You have been infiltrating Imperial space," Admiral Thorax said. It was not a question. "We have been exploring the galaxy for a very long time," Admiral Chun confirmed. "We find it useful to keep track of what our neighbors are doing. Knowledge is the best defense against unpleasant surprises." Admiral Thorax realized that everything he thought he knew about the balance of power in the galaxy was wrong. The Empire was not the dominant force he had believed it to be. Humanity had been watching, learning, and preparing while the Empire conquered primitive worlds and enslaved helpless species. What happens now? Admiral Thorax asked. Admiral Chun smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Now, Admiral, you have a choice to make. You can return to Imperial space with the knowledge of what you have seen here. You can report to your superiors that humanity is not what it appears to be, or you can try to fight us and discover just how outmatched you really are." Admiral Thorax looked at his tactical display one more time. The Imperial fleet was completely surrounded by human ships that outnumbered them at least 10 to 1. Each human ship was more advanced than anything the Empire could field. Fighting would not be a battle. It would be a massacre. "I think we will choose the first option," Admiral Thorax said. "A wise choice," Admiral Chun replied. "However, there is one more thing you should see before you leave. Consider it a final demonstration of human capabilities." The space around then began to ripple and fold in ways that hurt to look at. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist as the human ships activated systems that operated beyond the normal laws of physics. The massive shipyard complex, the construction platforms, the partially built vessels, and even the completed warships began to fade from view within minutes. The space that had been filled with the largest industrial complex Admiral Thorax had ever seen appeared completely empty once again. The human fleet had vanished without a trace, leaving only empty void and the memory of what had been there moments before. "Impressive, isn't it?" Admiral Chin's voice said from the speakers, though her image was no longer visible on the screen. "Space is very large, Admiral Thorax. There is room for many secrets, and humans are very good at keeping secrets." Admiral Thorax stood in silence, staring at the empty space where moments before he had seen the true power of humanity revealed. The implications were staggering, and he was only beginning to understand them. Admiral Thorax stood in the silence of his bridge, staring at the empty space where moments before he had witnessed the most advanced military installation he had ever seen. His officers looked around nervously, unsure of what to do or say. The Tactical displays showed nothing but empty void, as if the massive human shipyard had never existed at all. "Sir," the communications officer said quietly, "Admiral Chun is requesting permission to beam aboard our ship." Admiral Thorax almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Here he was, commanding one of the most powerful fleets in the Imperial Navy, and he was being asked for permission by a representative of a species he had thought was primitive just days ago. But the laughter died in his throat when he realized the true meaning of the request. "Beam aboard?" Admiral Thorax asked. "They have teleportation technology?" "It appears so, sir," the communications officer replied. "She says she would like to have a private conversation with you before you return to Imperial space." Admiral Thorax considered his options. He could refuse the request, but that might be seen as hostile by a species that had just demonstrated the ability to make his entire fleet disappear. He could accept, but that would mean allowing unknown alien technology to operate on his flagship. Neither choice was particularly appealing. "Very well," Admiral Thorax said finally. "Tell Admiral Chun that she has permission to come aboard. But I want full security protocols in place." "Yes, sir." Within minutes, the bridge was filled with a strange humming sound and a bright flash of light. When Admiral Thorax's vision cleared, Admiral Chun was standing in the center of his bridge, looking completely at ease despite being surrounded by heavily armed alien soldiers. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Admiral Thorax," she said politely. "I hope you will forgive the dramatic entrance. Our transportation technology takes some getting used to." Admiral Thorax gestured for his security team to lower their weapons. There was no point in threatening someone who had just demonstrated the ability to appear anywhere she wanted at any time. "Please, Admiral Chun," Admiral Thorax said, "join me in my private office. I believe we have much to discuss." Admiral Thorax's office was located just behind the main bridge, separated by a heavy blast door that could protect the command center in case of emergency. As they walked through the door, Admiral Thorax noticed that Admiral Chun was studying every detail of his ship's construction and technology. Her eyes missed nothing. "Please sit," Admiral Thorax said, gesturing to a chair that had been designed for human-sized visitors. Admiral Chun sat down and looked directly at him with those sharp blue eyes that seemed to see everything. "I imagine you have many questions about what you have seen today." "That would be an understatement," Admiral Thorax replied. "I think it would be fair to say that everything my species believed about yours has been proven completely wrong." Admiral Chun nodded. "That was intentional, Admiral Thorax. For over 1,000 years, humanity has been watching the Galactic Empire expand across the galaxy. We have seen how you treat species that resist your expansion. We have seen how you enslave entire worlds and strip them of their resources. We decided very early that we would not allow that to happen to Earth." Admiral Thorax leaned back in his chair, processing what she was telling him. "You have been watching us for 1,000 years? Since your first contact with the Altarian Republic," Admiral Chun confirmed. "We observed your conquest of their homeworld. We studied your tactics and your technology. We learned everything we could about how the Empire operates. The Altarian Republic had been conquered over 900 years ago. If the humans had been watching since then, they had observed the Empire's expansion from its very beginning. They had seen every conquest, every enslavement, every world that had fallen under Imperial control." "How?" Admiral Thorax asked. "How did you observe us without being detected?" Admiral Chun smiled. "Humans are very good at being invisible when we want to be. We developed stealth technology centuries before we made official contact with any galactic civilization. We sent scout ships throughout Imperial space, gathering information and preparing for the day when the Empire would finally notice Earth." Admiral Thorax felt a chill as the implications sank in. "Your scout ships are still out there." "Oh yes," Admiral Chun said casually. "We have observers in every major Imperial system. We monitor your military movements, your political decisions, your technological developments. We probably know more about the Empire than most Imperial citizens do." This was worse than Admiral Thorax had imagined. The humans had not just been preparing to defend Earth, They had been conducting a massive intelligence operation throughout Imperial space for centuries. They knew everything about the Empire's strengths and weaknesses. "What else have you been doing while you watched us?" Admiral Thorax asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Admiral Chun's expression became more serious. "We have been making friends, Admiral Thorax. The Empire has conquered many worlds, but not all of them are happy about it. Some species would prefer to be free. Some would like help in achieving that freedom." Admiral Thorax felt his blood run cold. "You have been contacting conquered species." "We have been offering assistance to species that ask for it, Admiral." Chun corrected. "The galaxy is a big place, Admiral. There is room for many different forms of government. Not everyone wants to live under Imperial rule." The implications were staggering. If the humans had been secretly supporting resistance movements throughout Imperial space, they could destabilize the entire Empire. Worse, if they had been sharing their advanced technology with rebel groups, the Empire could be facing uprisings. "On hundreds of worlds, how many species have you contacted?" Admiral Thorax asked. "That would be telling," Admiral Chun replied with a slight smile. "Let us just say that humanity believes in the right of all intelligent species to determine their own destiny. We are willing to help those who share that belief." Admiral Thorax realized that he was not just learning about human capabilities. He was learning about a vast conspiracy that threatened the very foundation of the Empire. The humans had been playing a game that was far more complex and dangerous than simple military preparation. "The supercarrier behind your moon," Admiral Thorax said suddenly. "It is not a research vessel." "Actually, it is," Admiral Chun replied. "We use it to test new technologies before we deploy them on our main fleet. The ship you detected is quite old by our standards. We built it over 300 years ago as a prototype." 300 years. Admiral Thorax tried to imagine what human technology must look like now if the massive ship they had detected was an obsolete prototype. "What are your newest ships capable of?" Admiral Thorax asked. Admiral Chun considered the question for a moment. "Our newest vessels operate partially outside normal space-time. They can travel anywhere in the galaxy almost instantaneously. They are powered by controlled singularities and armed with weapons that manipulate fundamental forces. They are also completely invisible to any known form of sensor technology." Admiral Thorax stared at her. Weapons that manipulated fundamental forces. Ships that operated outside normal space-time. The humans were not just more advanced than the Empire. They were operating on a completely different level of technological development. "Why are you telling me this?" Admiral Thorax asked. "Why? Reveal your capabilities now?" Admiral Chun's expression became very serious. "Because the Empire has reached a crossroads, Admiral Thorax. You can continue trying to expand through conquest and enslavement, or you can learn to coexist peacefully with other species. The choice is yours, but you should understand the consequences of that choice. You are threatening the Empire." "I am informing the Empire," Admiral Chun corrected. "Humanity has spent centuries preparing for this moment. We have the technology to defend ourselves and our allies. We have intelligence networks throughout Imperial space. We have the support of many species that are tired of Imperial oppression. What we do with all of these advantages depends on what the Empire chooses to do next." Admiral Thorax realized that this was not just a diplomatic meeting. This was an ultimatum delivered by a species that had the power to back up their demands. The Empire could choose to change its ways, or it could face opposition from an enemy that had been preparing for this conflict for 1,000 years. "What exactly do you want the Empire to do?" Admiral Thorax asked. "We want you to stop expanding through conquest," Admiral Chun said simply. "We want you to grant independence to any species that requests it. We want you to treat other civilizations as equals rather than subjects. In short, we want the Empire to become a force for cooperation rather than domination." Admiral Thorax almost laughed. What she was describing would mean the end of the Empire as it had existed for 10,000 years. The Imperial government would Never agree to such demands, and if the Empire refuses? Admiral Thorax asked. Admiral Chun's expression did not change, but her tone became colder. Then the Empire will discover that humanity is not the only species that has been preparing for change. You will find that your conquered worlds are not as secure as you believe. You will discover that your supply lines are more vulnerable than you thought. You will learn that ruling through fear only works when you are the most frightening thing in the galaxy. Admiral Thorax understood the threat perfectly. The humans were not just offering to defend Earth, they were threatening to support rebellion throughout the Empire. With their advanced technology and centuries of intelligence gathering, they could turn the Empire's own size against it. This conversation will be reported to Imperial Command, Admiral Thorax said. I hope it will be, Admiral Chun replied. The sooner your leaders understand the new reality, the better for everyone involved. The galaxy is changing, Admiral Thorax. The Empire can choose to change with it, or it can be changed by forces beyond its control. Admiral Chun stood up and walked toward the door. I think our conversation is finished. You have learned what you came here to learn. Now you need to decide what to do with that knowledge. How do I know you are not bluffing? Admiral Thorax asked. How do I know you really have the capabilities you claim? Admiral Chun paused at the door and turned back to him. You don't, Admiral, but ask yourself this question. If we were bluffing, would we have revealed ourselves now? If we were weak, would we have shown you our shipyard? If we were unprepared, would we have surrounded your fleet with superior forces? Admiral Thorax had no answer for that. Everything the humans had done suggested that they were completely confident in their abilities. They were acting like a species that held all the advantages and knew it. One more thing, Admiral Thorax, Admiral Chun said. The ship you detected behind our moon was never hiding from you. We wanted you to find it. We wanted you to investigate. We wanted you to discover that humanity is not what it appears to be. This entire encounter has been carefully planned to deliver a specific message to the Empire. With that, Admiral Chun activated some kind of device on her wrist. The same humming sound filled the room, followed by a flash of light. When Admiral Thorax's vision cleared, she was gone. Admiral Thorax sat alone in his office, staring at the chair where Admiral Chun had been sitting moments before. Everything that had happened in the past week suddenly made sense. The humans had orchestrated the entire encounter from beginning to end. They had allowed the Empire to discover their supercarrier. They had provided coordinates to their shipyard. They had demonstrated their overwhelming technological superiority. All of it had been planned to deliver a single message. The Empire was no longer the dominant power in the galaxy. The humans were. Admiral Thorax stood at the observation deck of his flagship, watching the stars slowly move past as his fleet traveled back toward Imperial space. 3 weeks had passed since their encounter with the humans, and he still found it difficult to believe what he had witnessed. The journey home was giving him time to think about everything Admiral Chun had told him, and the more he thought about it, the more worried he became. The humans had done something that Admiral Thorax had never seen before in his long military career. They had deliberately disabled his fleet's faster-than-light engines before allowing them to leave the Sol system. It was not an act of hostility, Admiral Chun had explained. It was a practical measure to ensure that the Imperial leadership had time to think carefully about what they had learned. Time to think, Admiral Chun had said with that unsettling smile of hers. Humans have learned that important decisions should not be made in haste. The Empire will have several months to consider its response while you travel home at sublight speeds. Several months. Admiral Thorax knew that Admiral Chun was right about the value of thinking carefully. The information he was carrying back to Imperial Command would change everything about how the Empire viewed the galaxy. But he also knew that the Imperial leadership did not like surprises, and they especially did not like being told that their power was not as absolute as they believed. Sir, Lieutenant Zareth said, approaching him with a datapad in her hands. The daily intelligence report from our scout ships. Admiral Thorax took the datapad and reviewed the information. His scouts had been monitoring communications throughout Imperial space during their journey home, trying to detect any signs of the human activities that Admiral Chun had hinted at. What they were finding was deeply disturbing. Unusual communication. Patterns in the Kethver system? Admiral Thorax asked, reading from the report. Yes, sir, Lieutenant Zareth replied. Our scouts detected encrypted transmissions using technology that does not match any known Imperial or Rebel communication systems. The transmissions stopped as soon as our scouts moved closer to investigate? Admiral Thorax continued reading. Similar reports were coming in from dozens of systems throughout Imperial space. Unknown ships appearing briefly on sensor screens before vanishing again. Communication signals that could not be decoded. Supply convoys that arrived at their destinations. Missing cargo that had never been officially loaded. How long have these activities been going on? Admiral Thorax asked. According to our analysis, sir, probably for years. Maybe decades. We only noticed them because we started looking specifically for signs of covert operations. Admiral Thorax felt his stomach twist into knots. The humans had not been exaggerating about their intelligence network. They had been operating throughout Imperial space for so long that their activities had become part of the background noise that Imperial forces normally ignored. What about the conquered worlds? Admiral Thorax asked. Any signs of unusual rebel activity? Lieutenant Zareth hesitated before answering. Sir, that is the strange part. Rebel activity has actually decreased in most systems over the past several years. But productivity on many conquered worlds has increased significantly. It is almost as if the subject populations are becoming more cooperative, not less. Admiral Thorax studied this information carefully. At first glance, it seemed like good news. Peaceful, productive colonies were exactly what the Empire wanted. But given what he now knew about human activities, the pattern seemed suspicious. Why would rebel activity decrease just when the humans were supposedly supporting independence? Movements? The answer came to him suddenly, and it made him feel sick. The humans were not supporting random acts of rebellion. They were organizing resistance movements, training them, and preparing them for coordinated action. The decrease in rebel activity was not a sign of success for the Empire. It was a sign that the rebels were becoming more disciplined and more dangerous. Lieutenant, Admiral Thorax said, I want you to prepare a special intelligence report. Mark it for immediate delivery to Imperial Command as soon as we arrive. Include all of these unusual activity reports and add a priority flag for immediate analysis. Yes, sir, Lieutenant Zareth replied. Sir, may I ask what you think these reports mean? Admiral Thorax looked out at the stars again, thinking about Admiral Chun's confident smile and her casual mention of friends throughout the galaxy. I think they mean that the Empire is in much more danger than anyone realizes. 2 months later, Admiral Thorax's fleet finally arrived at the Imperial Command Station in the core systems. The massive space station was the administrative center of the Empire, home to the High Council and the Imperial Fleet Command. It was also one of the most heavily defended locations in known space. Protected by dozens of battleships and thousands of defensive platforms, Admiral Thorax had spent the entire journey preparing his report for the High Council. He knew that what he had to tell them would be difficult for them to accept. The Empire's leadership was not accustomed to being told that they were not the most powerful force in the galaxy. The meeting with the High Council took place in the Great Chamber at the center of the station. The 12 members of the council sat in a semicircle around a central podium where Admiral Thorax stood to deliver his report. Behind them, holographic displays showed maps of the Empire and real-time status reports from throughout Imperial space. Admiral Thorax began his presentation with the basic facts of the encounter. The discovery of the human supercarrier, the meeting with Admiral Chun, the visit to the human shipyard, and the demonstration of human technological superiority. He spoke clearly and factually, avoiding any interpretation or opinion about what the events meant. The council members listened in silence, but Admiral Thorax could see the disbelief and growing anger on their faces. Counselor Vexstar, the head of Imperial Intelligence, was the first to speak when Admiral Thorax finished his report. "Admiral Thorax," Counselor Vextar said, his voice carefully controlled, "you are asking us to believe that a primitive species has somehow acquired technology that surpasses our own? You are asking us to believe that they have been operating spy networks throughout our territory without being detected. You are asking us to believe that they pose a serious threat to the Empire." "I am reporting what I observed, Counselor," Admiral Thorax replied. "Whether you choose to believe it is not my decision to make." Counselor Mulder, the head of the Imperial fleet, stood up from his chair. His species was known for their aggressive nature and their belief in military solutions to political problems. Even if this report is accurate, the solution is obvious. We send a full battle fleet to the Sol system and eliminate this threat before it can grow larger. Admiral Thorax had expected this response. "Counselor Mulder, with respect, I do not believe that would be wise. The humans demonstrated the ability to make our entire battle group disappear at will. They have weapons technology that we do not understand and cannot counter. A military response would likely result in the complete destruction of any Imperial force sent against them." "Impossible," Counselor Mulder snapped. "No single species could have developed such advanced technology without our knowledge. Your report must be exaggerated or mistaken." Admiral Thorax pulled out a small device that Admiral Chun had given him before he left the Sol system. "The humans provided me with this as proof of our encounter. They said it would help convince the Council that their capabilities are real." Admiral Thorax activated the device. Immediately, every holographic display in the Council chamber changed. Instead of showing Imperial territory and fleet positions, the displays now showed detailed maps of human activities throughout the galaxy. Spy networks, hidden bases, communication relays, and support operations were highlighted on hundreds of different worlds. The Council members stared in shock as the displays revealed the true scope of human operations. Their intelligence network covered nearly every major Imperial system. Their support operations were providing aid to resistance movements on dozens of conquered worlds. Most disturbing of all, their hidden bases were positioned to disrupt Imperial supply lines and communication networks throughout the galaxy. This information was gathered by human intelligence operations over the past 1,000 years, Admiral Thorax explained. They wanted you to understand that they know everything about the Empire. Every fleet movement, every political decision, every weakness in your defenses. Counselor Vextar was studying the displays with professional interest. As head of Imperial intelligence, he understood better than anyone what this information represented. This is comprehensive intelligence gathering on a scale that should not be possible. If this data is accurate, they know more about the Empire than we know about ourselves. The question, Admiral Thorax said, is what the Empire intends to do with this knowledge. The Council chamber fell silent as the members considered their options. The information on the displays made it clear that any military response would be met by an enemy that knew exactly where Imperial forces were and how they operated. The humans had spent centuries preparing for this moment, and they held every advantage. Finally, High Counselor Zareth, the leader of the Council, spoke. "Admiral Thorax, what exactly did the humans demand from the Empire?" "They want the Empire to stop expanding through conquest," Admiral Thorax replied. "They want any species that requests independence to receive it. They want the Empire to treat other civilizations as equals rather than subjects." High Counselor Zareth considered this for a long moment. "And if we refuse these demands?" Admiral Thorax thought about Admiral Chun's cold smile and her casual mention of vulnerable supply lines. "Then the Empire will face organized resistance throughout its territory, supported by technology that we cannot match and intelligence networks that we cannot penetrate." The Council members began talking among themselves in urgent whispers. Admiral Thorax waited patiently while they debated. He knew that they were facing an impossible choice. They could maintain their traditional policies and face an enemy that could destroy them, or they could abandon everything the Empire had stood for during 10,000 years of expansion. After an hour of debate, High Counselor Zareth called for silence. Admiral Thorax, you will remain here at the command station while we consider our response. In the meantime, we are issuing orders to all Imperial fleets to avoid the Sol system and any territories that humans may claim as their own. Admiral. Thorax nodded. Yes, High Counselor. As he left the council chamber, Admiral Thorax knew that the galaxy had changed forever. The Empire would never again be the unchallenged power that it had been for thousands of years. The humans had revealed themselves at the perfect moment, when they held all the advantages and the Empire had no choice but to listen. 6 months later, Admiral Thorax received word that strange events were happening throughout Imperial space. Supply convoys were disappearing, communication networks were failing, and several conquered worlds had declared independence. Imperial forces sent to investigate these incidents found empty space where rebel bases should have been, and their ships suffered mysterious equipment failures that left them stranded until rescue arrived. The message was clear. The humans were demonstrating their ability to cripple the Empire without firing a shot. They could make Imperial forces disappear, just as easily as they had made their own shipyard vanish. The Empire's size and complexity, which had always been sources of strength, had become vulnerabilities that the humans could exploit at will. Admiral Thorax stood at his window, looking out at the stars and wondering how many of them now harbored human bases or human allies. The galaxy was much larger than the Empire had ever imagined, and humanity had been exploring it for far longer than anyone had suspected. The age of Imperial dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun, and the species that had once dismissed humans as primitives were now learning that sometimes the most dangerous enemies were the ones who remained hidden until they were ready to reveal themselves. The humans had been playing chess while the Empire was still learning the rules of the game, and now, finally, the game was over.